Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we take a whole stack of information and really pull out the crucial bits of knowledge and insight for you.
That's right.
Today, we are diving deep into something making a lot of headlines. China's evolving missile and defense capabilities. We've got some pretty interesting sources lined up, detailed defense analyses, a really lively public debate on industrial production, and reports from international research institutes, too.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex area, lots of technical stuff, and, often quite different perspectives, actually.
Right.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to sort of guide you through all this material. We want to highlight what's really critical for understanding China's strategic posture and, well, what it all means.
Yeah.
We'll look at their missile defense progress, that debate around manufacturing capacity.
Oh, yeah?
The growth of their nuclear arsenal, which is significant, and those ongoing worries about proliferation.
Okay, let's get into it. We've seen so many reports, new tests, new capabilities. There's just a ton of international focus on what China's developing.
Yeah.
When you look at their missile defense specifically,
Yeah.
what jumps out at you first?
Well, I think what's really striking is the consistency. The consistency of their testing, especially with ground-based mid-course anti-ballistic missile tech.
Okay.
So February 4th, 2021, China announced its 5th successful trial. 5th said it achieved its goals.
Right.
And that followed tests in 2010, 2013, 2014, 2018. It just shows this really sustained effort. It's not a flash in the pan. And this is a seriously challenging area technologically.
So, okay, for maybe folks listening who aren't deep into defense tech, what exactly is mid-course anti-ballistic missile technology? Why is it so tough?
Right. So think of it like intercepting a missile way up high, usually in space or maybe the very edge of the atmosphere, long before it starts coming down towards its target zone.
Yeah.
The idea is if you hit it there, the debris, doesn't fall on your own territory.
Makes sense.
But doing that, it needs incredibly early, incredibly accurate detection. You need sophisticated long-range radar, maybe space-based radar too, stuff like X-band radar. And these systems have to be smart enough to tell the real missile apart from any decoys someone might launch with it.
Ah, okay.
Then the interceptor missiles themselves, they need these huge high-thrust booster rockets, often 2 stages, just to get them high enough and fast enough for that interception.
So it's not just the missile, it's the whole system around it.
Exactly. That's the key thing. The supporting systems, the radar, the command and control, and that's a massive leap.
So what does this mean for their actual interceptor missiles? We hear names like HQ-19, the DN series.
Yes, exactly. So sources like Global Security, they list several types: HQ-9B, HQ-19, HQ-26, HQ-29, DN1, DN2.
That's quite a few.
It is. The HQ-19, its capabilities are often compared to the U.S. THAAD system, terminal high-altitude area defense.
Right, to date.
Some Russian reports even suggest it might be in early deployment already, or maybe able to intercept India's Agni series missiles, for example.
Interesting. And it uses kinetic hit to kill warheads. Infrared homing.
Hit to kill.
Yeah, it physically slams into the incoming missile. No explosion needed, just brute force impact. China reportedly got that tech back in 1999. Second country in the world to do it. Wow. And then there's the DN3. That's considered maybe their best kinetic hit-to-kill mid-course interceptor. Could potentially replace the HQ-19 as the main workhorse.
Okay, now here's where it gets, really interesting to me. The link between missile defense and anti-satellite weapons, ASAT. Our sources suggest there's quite a bit of overlap, maybe even skepticism from outside.
This is a really crucial point, and it causes a lot of concern, frankly.
Right.
Some reports strongly suggest that China's missile defense tests are, also tests for ASAT weapons, dual purpose.
So hitting satellites instead of missiles?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The U.S. Department of Defense, for instance, they speculated that China's 2018 test was the DN3 interceptor and the 2021 test was the HQ-19.
Okay.
And they consider both of those to be already in service ASAT weapons.
Ooh. Then you have the SC-19 missile. It's suspected of having multiple identities. Might be the DN1 missile. Popular Mechanics called the SC-19 an ASAT missile, derived from the DF-21C, and said it's already deployable. Completed 5 tests.
And China has tested ASAT capability before, right? That 2007 incident.
They have at least 6 ASAT experiments. And yes, that 2007 test where they destroyed one of their own defunct weather satellites, that caused a huge international backlash, created thousands of pieces of dangerous space debris.
So what does it really mean for other countries if China has a strong ASAT capability? What are the implications?
Well, it's profound. If China can reliably take out satellites, it severely impacts another country's freedom to use space.
For military stuff.
For military, yes, but also civilian. Think about communication, navigation like GPS, intelligence gathering, even guiding precision weapons relies heavily on satellites now.
Right, everything.
Taking those out essentially blinds and deafens a modern military force. And it goes back to that dual use issue. A system developed for missile defense might work just as well, or even better, against satellites in orbit.
So the lines are blurred.
Very much so. U.S. expert Richard Fisher, he pointed out China is likely doing ASAT and anti-missile experiments at the same time, maybe even using the same missile, like the SC-19 for both roles.
Okay, so you have all these different missiles, HQ this, DN that, maybe SC-19 doing double duty. How do they fit together? Is there a cohesive defense network?
Yes, it seems they've established a multi-layered network. That's the standard approach for robust defense.
Okay.
The first level, that mid-course interception way up high, outside the atmosphere, that seems to be the job of the DN series missiles.
Got it.
Then the second level, sort of for the edges of the atmosphere, you have systems like the HQ-19 and HQ-26.
Lower down, but still high.
Exactly. And finally, the third level, terminal interceptions. That's catching missiles within the atmosphere, closer to the target. That's where the HQ-9B and HQ-29 come in.
So layers of defense.
Precisely. It builds this complex, multi-level air and space defense system. It integrates satellites, early warning radar, and all these different missile types. The goal is resilience. If one layer misses, another gets a shot.
Which brings us neatly to the early warning system, the eyes and ears you mentioned. How advanced is that part?
Crucial part. And yes, China's developed a pretty comprehensive early warning system now. Integrates satellites and ground radar.
Okay.
Historically, they just had long-range radar on the ground. Now it's a networked system, much more capable.
Any specifics?
Well, back in 2017, China's Central Television showed off a new large-scale phased array radar. People called it the Chinese PAVE-PAWS, referencing the U.S. system.
Right.
It operates in P-band, meter wave. That lets it spot, track, identify targets at extremely long distances. And the really eye-popping spec was the number of TR modules transmitting and receiving modules.
How many?
12,000.
12,000.
Yeah. Reportedly the largest number in the world for a phased array radar of that type.
What does that actually mean, having so many modules?
It means incredible power and flexibility. Think of it like thousands of individual spotlights scanning the sky at once.
Okay.
Each module can send and receive signals independently, so it can cover a huge area with amazing precision, track multiple targets, resist jamming. It just gives them a much better, much earlier picture of incoming threats, more time for the interceptors to react.
And you mentioned international cooperation here, too.
Yes, that's another important piece. Russia is helping China develop its early warning system.
Really? How so?
President Putin confirmed it in 2019, said Russia was assisting with their Tundra early warning satellites, and China's also building its own ground system based on tech similar to Russia's Voronezh DM radars.
Which have a huge range, right?
Massive range, up to 4, maybe 6,000 kilometers detection range.
Wow. And satellites, are they building their own, too?
Oh, yes. They started developing their own early warning satellites back in 2013, maybe even earlier. There's a series called FireEye, believed to be for ballistic missile early warning.
FireEye? Yeah. FireEye 2, launched in 2017, apparently has highly sensitive infrared detection, operates in synchronous orbit.
So it stays over one spot.
Right. And if you position one, say, over the Western Pacific, it could potentially cover a vast area, from Midway Atoll all the way to East Africa, Arctic to the South Pole. Truly global reach.
That is a significant upgrade in their surveillance capability.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. There was this one claim in our source material that really made me do a double take. The idea that China could produce more than 1,000 cruise missiles a day.
Yes, that one. This is where the discussion in the materials we looked at gets, shall we say, quite animated, a real divergence of opinion.
Understatement, maybe.
Perhaps. The original post making the claim suggested this kind of production could, quote, surpass any kind of air defense existing in the world, and implied only the U.S. and Russia could even possibly match it.
1,000 a day. So what were the arguments for this? How could anyone possibly justify that number? Well, the proponents, they framed it as a peak capability type of thing. Not daily peacetime production, but like full-blown wartime surge capacity.
Okay, wartime surge.
Their argument hinges on automation. That automation would slash the cost per missile down to just the marginal input costs. Raw materials, basically. Forget labor, profits, taxes in that scenario. There's also the argument about centralized control. That China's government can just force factories to switch to military production, order it done.
Right.
And some pointed to China's known industrial might, that Foxconn complex making 500,000 iPhones a day, or China producing 82,000 cars a day nationally.
So the argument is if they can do that.
Exactly. If they can do that, then 1,000 missiles a day is, quote, eminently doable if they can set up the production chain. Given their resources and manufacturing know-how, someone even brought up the U.S. building a warship a week in WWII.
Okay, so that's the they could do it camp. But man, there was a lot of pushback on this one. What were the counter-arguments? Because the skepticism seemed pretty strong.
Oh, incredibly strong. And, for some pretty solid reasons. Lots of comments just flat out called it total BS or laughable.
Yeah, saw those.
The biggest hurdle is probably the cost. It's just astronomical. 1,000 cruise missiles a day. Even if you lowball the cost at, say, $1 million each.
That's $1 billion a year.
Exactly. $1 billion a day. $365 billion a year. That's way more than China's entire current defense budget.
Huh?
How could they sustain that? Even for a short war, it raises huge questions.
Right.
Then there's the complexity. Critics hammered this point. Modern cruise missiles aren't simple things. They have jet engines needing hours of testing. They're packed with sophisticated electronics, sensors, navigation systems.
Well, not like assembling an iPhone, maybe?
Not quite. Every single component needs rigorous testing.
Yeah.
They argued it's nothing like car assembly. And the logistics, supplying all the specialized chips, sensors, fuel components, plus maintaining these supposed near fully automated factories at that speed. It just seems immense.
And that WWII comparison, did that hold up?
Not really, according to the critics. They pointed out WWII planes were, far simpler, sometimes wood and cloth structures. Today's cruise missiles have tons of advanced electronics.
Different league entirely.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A key argument against it was that even NATO as a whole struggles with high-volume missile production. Look at Ukraine. Their intelligence estimates Russia, on a full war footing, is making maybe 60 cruise missiles a month.
60 a month versus 1,000 a day.
Yeah, it makes the 1,000 a day claim look, well, implausible to many. And the idea of building these incredibly expensive automated production lines just for a hypothetical future war when missile tech changes so fast, it seems unaffordable, strategically questionable, even for the U.S.
So a lot of skepticism about the practicality and cost.
Absolutely. And, this whole debate really highlights something about information today, how quickly these kinds of extraordinary claims can spread online, and how vital it is to look critically at where they come from. Many dismissed it as propaganda or just, not credible.
Right. A very heated online discussion, that one. Okay, moving beyond the production debate, fascinating as it is, let's turn to China's nuclear arsenal itself. Because the sources we look at show a really significant surge there.
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture, there's a SciPRI report, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, indicating China's nuclear arsenal jumped by an estimated 20% in just 1 year.
20%? Wow.
Yeah, growing from maybe 500 warheads to over 600 projected for 2025. That means Beijing now has more warheads than the UK and France combined.
That's a shift.
And it's expanding faster than any other nuclear power, adding roughly 100 new warheads each year since 2023, according to these estimates.
That is rapid growth. But how does that compare overall? Where does it put them relative to, say, the U.S. and Russia?
Still solidly in third place, quantitatively speaking, despite the rapid buildup, even if they hit that projected maximum of 1,500 warheads by 2035.
Which is the U.S. projection, right?
Right, the Pentagon projection. Their stockpile would still only be about a third of the current Russian arsenal, which is around 5,459 warheads, and the U.S. at 5,177.
Still much smaller.
Much smaller. The U.S. and Russia together hold almost 90% of all the world's nuclear weapons. But there's a nuance in the SciPRI report. While the total number of warheads globally has dropped slightly because the U.S. and Russia are dismantling older ones,
Okay.
the number of usable warheads in military stockpiles, the ones ready to go, that actually increased slightly in 2025.
So fewer overall, but more potentially operational ones.
Exactly. That's the key distinction. More weapons on high alert or assigned to forces.
And how are other countries reacting to China's buildup? You mentioned Russia earlier with the early warning. How do they view the nuclear expansion?
It's complicated. As one analyst put it, there's a part of Russia that kind of appreciates China's buildup because, it helps counter the U.S., creates more challenges for Washington. But at the same time, they're also long-term worried that they will become number 3 globally. not just in warheads, but in overall power status.
Losing influence relative to China.
Exactly. It shows that shifting geopolitical landscape, competition even between powers that might seem aligned on some issues.
Let's talk about the missiles carrying these warheads, the Dongfeng series, the DF missiles. That's the core of their force, right?
Absolutely. The Dongfeng, or DF series, is the backbone. Goes way back, actually. Roots in Soviet designs from the 1950s.
Okay.
The DF-5 is their big, silo-based ICBM intercontinental ballistic missile. Carries about a 3-megaton warhead, range up to 12,000 kilometers.
Which can reach.
Parts of the U.S., certainly. And there's an improved DF-5A variant that can go over 13,000 kilometers, launched from eastern China that could potentially hit all of the mainland U.S.
Right. And the newer ones, we hear about the DF-41.
Yes, the DF-41 is the big development. It's road mobile, which makes it harder to find and target before launch.
Like the Russian Topol-M.
Similar concept, yes. And it reportedly carries 10 to 12 MIRV warheads.
MIRVs. Multiple, independently targetable reentry vehicles.
That's it. One missile, multiple warheads hitting different targets. Huge force multiplier. And its estimated range, believed to surpass the U.S. Minuteman ICBM, could be the world's longest range missile.
So mobility, multiple warheads, huge range. That's a significant upgrade.
Massive upgrade. And you have to remember, the PLA rocket force was elevated to a full-service branch back in 2015. China's leader Xi Jinping called it China's core force for strategic deterrence. They're clearly prioritizing it.
And they're also working on hypersonics, HTVs.
Yes, hypersonic glide vehicles. These are designed to fly at extreme speeds, but also maneuver within the atmosphere, making them incredibly hard for current missile defenses to intercept. That's another major focus area for them.
Okay, that leads us to the last piece, which is also pretty sensitive. Proliferation. Spreading nuclear or missile tech. Are there still concerns there?
Yes, this remains a significant point of friction and concern, particularly for the U.S. It challenges the whole global non-proliferation regime.
How so?
Well, official U.S. government sources say the Chinese government itself seems to have stopped direct involvement in transferring nuclear and missile-related items.
Okay, that's positive.
It is. But the issue is that China-based companies and individuals apparently continue to export goods relevant to these programs, particularly to places like Iran and North Korea.
So not state-sponsored, but happening anyway.
That's the assessment. The U.S. government has repeatedly raised concerns about, quote, weaknesses in China's export control system. They just don't seem to be stopping it effectively.
Are there examples?
Yeah, a 2019 State Department report said Chinese entities kept supplying items controlled by the MTCR, the Missile Technology Control Regime.
Right, the agreement to limit missile tech spread.
Exactly. They were supplying MTCR-controlled stuff in 2018 to missile programs of concern, including Iran, North Korea, Syria, and Pakistan.
And has the U.S. done anything in response?
Yes, frequently. They've used sanctions against China-based entities and individuals quite a lot over the years for proliferation activities.
Recent example.
Just this year, 2024, on September 12th, the State Department sanctioned a Chinese entity for helping Pakistan's ballistic missile program, specifically providing equipment for testing large-diameter rocket motors. And they sanctioned other entities and individuals at the same time for unspecified ballistic missile proliferation activities. It's an ongoing pattern. Similar actions happened in previous years.
So the flow continues, despite official policy.
It seems so. A former U.S. official had a quote that stuck with me. He said that while the transfers might not be directly state-sponsored, China hasn't devoted the priority, effort, or resources to thwart the activity, implying that, as he put it, over time it becomes a choice not to crack down effectively, which allows this flow of sensitive technology to continue.
Right. It puts a different light on it. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What does this all mean for us, for you listening? We've gone through China's multi-layered missile defense, that rapidly growing nuclear arsenal, the really eye-opening debate about cruise missile production capacity, and these persistent worries about proliferation.
Yeah, stepping back and looking at the whole picture, what really emerges is, well, it's a nation that's rapidly, systematically advancing its strategic military power.
Across the board.
Across the board. It's about reinforcing their nuclear deterrence, sure, but also about countering perceived threats and, frankly, projecting power and influence. You see it in the sophisticated HQ-19 interceptors that massive Chinese PAVE-PAWS radar,
Hmm.
the sheer number of new nuclear warheads coming online each year, and even that potential, however debated, for truly staggering missile production. They are clearly investing immense resources into these capabilities.
And this deep dive really hammered home for me how interconnected it all is.
Mhm.
It's not just one piece. It's the early warning targeting data to the missiles, which rely on an industrial base to produce them. It's a whole system.
Precisely. It's an ecosystem of defense and deterrence that's evolving very quickly, not just about reacting to one new test, but understanding the trajectory of the entire system.
Right.
And that really leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty important question to think about. As China continues these rapid advancements in its missile and defense capabilities, and as the world grapples with understanding them, how might all of this fundamentally reshape global strategic stability and the balance of power in the decade ahead?